Hello, welcome Brett, welcome Diane, Claire, Charlie, Dan. I can't keep up with all the people that are coming in the room at the moment, but really excited to have you here and to have Erica Brescia, the CEO of GitHub, join us for us this afternoon, for those on the West Coast this morning. So thank you for joining our Core Collective series. Just a very brief pitch on Underscore, and then we'll hand it over to Richard and Erica. So for those who don't know, and those who do, we'll be excited to share it again. Underscore is very much a community-driven early-stage venture firm. We back founders from seed to Series A, predominantly in the B2B SaaS space, with an emphasis on building here in Boston. What's really unique about Underscore is that we recognize capital as a commodity, so we provide founders with what they really need, which is a community of proven experts aligned to their unique needs. And what makes this conversation, I think, even more fun is Erica is actually also a member of our core community. So we call this community our Underscore Core. And through the core, we're able to provide our founders with the right expertise and the right people at the right time. And that's all at zero cost to founders and a reward for our core members. So thank you for everyone that's joining us this today. And we hope to have a lively discussion. Feel free to use the chat to ask any questions and to introduce yourselves and to get to know one another. So that being said, I will hand it over to Richard.
Thank you, Jenny. And thank you everybody for joining this Core Collective series with Erica. This is an event that I've wanted to do for a long time. Erica has been a good friend for some time. And as many of you know, Underscore was founded on open source principles, in that we believe it takes a community to build a great company. And so as part of our formation about 6 years ago, we actually sought out Erica's advice as a friend and an open source thinker and leader. And so since then, she's been alongside with us, great counsel through the years since founding, both as a friend and a community member. And she's been helpful to introduce us to founders, help us select investments that we've made, both in cloud and open source, and on the backside, help those companies grow and be successful. And so it's no surprise, because she's actually been an entrepreneur herself, having led many companies like BitRock and more recently Bitnami, which she bootstrapped until acquisition by VMware. And now she finds herself not only on the board of the Linux Foundation, one of the leading open foundations in the world for the last 4 years, but also the Chief Operating Officer of GitHub, which is one of the leading world's platforms for software development. So with that, welcome, Erica.
Thank you. It's so great to be here. It's fun to get to do this.
Yeah, well, thank you for joining. And like all good fireside chats, everybody, today is meant to be interactive. So if you want to double click on any parts of the conversation or get some perspective for a burning question you have from Erica, feel free to leave it in the chat and we can pick it up there. In terms of format, we wanted to a little bit of moderated discussion, talk a little bit about the experience building, exiting and integrating Bitnami, talk about life at GitHub a little bit and the way Erica's leading amidst kind of turbulent times, if you will, and then talk a little bit about the state of open source and cloud, and then we'll turn it over to Q&A. So a bunch to do, so let's get to it. Erica, maybe a good place to start is actually way back, and let's talk a little bit about how you got into this wild world of technology, and specifically open source and cloud.
Yeah, honestly, it was somewhat by chance. I've always been really interested in technology, and back in about 2004, which is dating myself, I started reading a lot about open source and Linux. Now, I wasn't an engineer. I didn't have friends that were developers. But I found the challenge of like building Linux really, and then seeing these companies trying to build business around free and open source software is just a really interesting kind of social phenomenon and business opportunity. And I was introduced to my co-founder who had the exact like complementary set of skills, right? Deep technologist, incredibly talented engineer, real like visionary from a technical perspective. He'd been in open source for a long time, and he needed some help in thinking about how to build out the business. And the truth and the short version of a very long story is I went to help him out a little bit, and then I just got so excited about what he wanted to do in building BitRock that I up and moved to Spain, which is where we started the company, and things really just took off from there. And I'll just leave one more note on that topic. There was such an amazing group of open source community leaders and members that really kind of brought me along in this journey, right? I mean, I was somewhat of an outsider. I went to USC. I didn't go to like MIT or Stanford or some of the big technology schools. Certainly the internet and communities like this one didn't really exist back then. So I was really fortunate, I think, to attend some of the early open source events and meet some really great folks. And, you know, there are people like Martin Mikos, just to pick one of a number of amazing people. You know, met Dries very early on. I know you folks were investing in Acquia, but really just was kind of embraced by the open source community and had the great pleasure and opportunity of kind of riding along with its growth. So yeah, it was not totally planned, but once I saw what was happening, it just became an area I was really passionate about and a community that I love working with.
Yeah, well, you know, in part there's the serendipity, you know, some days you just kind of stumble into the things that are great, but they have to spark your kind of intellectual curiosity or something that gets you super excited. What was it about the open source business model that made you go like, okay, this is new and interesting and something I could sink my teeth into?
Yeah, I think the community aspects of open source are fascinating. And, you know, I mean, clearly you folks have spent a lot of time thinking about this too, but like what motivates people to contribute to something, especially in the early days of open source? You know, it was a lot of academic researchers and people just trying to advance the state of the art, right? And then we saw a bunch of open source projects, and like Linux is obviously a key example, but of folks coming together that just really wanted to solve a problem. And I found the opportunity to support those folks and their passion and their talents and build a real project with like good governance and strategy, but still allowing for the individual creativity of, you know, folks from around the world with different backgrounds and different perspectives and everything. I think that was really fascinating. And then layering on a business around that and trying to work through, I think, a challenging problem, which is how do you support the community and these folks that are oftentimes doing great work, you know, of their own volition to try to solve a problem with the needs of a business who needs to pay employees, right? We have this common dynamic, I think, in open source, where for companies to adopt a lot of open source technology, they want a company that's backing it up, that can provide them with, you know, support and an SLA and things like that. And so you have to balance these competing interests of, you know, customers who want specific things out of a project that community members might not be interested in building, you know, kind of enterprise grade access control, you know, auditability, compliance, things like that. With, you know, where a community wants to take something, and in the middle you have a company that obviously needs to create an amazing working environment for employees, needs to be able to pay them salaries, needs these people to be able to service the needs of the companies that want to buy the product. And so I think it's really just a fascinating challenge to me, and a really interesting set of dynamics to work through that you don't see in a lot of other businesses, right? I mean, in open source, you really do need to, I think, oftentimes walk a bit of a tightrope, and the model looks different depending on where in the stack you are. You know, if you're really an app versus infrastructure, what kind of model you've chosen from your company for your company, whether or not you control the IP or if it lives in a foundation, right? There's all these things that you need to work through when spinning up a commercial entity around a project. But it's an interesting challenge, and there's fun people working on it. And to me, like, there's no better combination than amazingly bright, passionate, fun, like genuinely caring people for the most part. There's not one community, right? So I don't want to overgeneralize, but comparing that with like commercial opportunity and moving the world forward, and, you know, changing the way that companies buy software and implement it and what they expect out of their vendors, like, it's super interesting to me. I mean, you can tell I've been doing it for 15 years and I still think it's interesting.
Yeah, and will continue to be interesting, but it's fun to hear your level of excitement for it, and very much keen to hear a little bit about how that plays into your role at GitHub, how you're thinking about the world. But before that, I actually want to talk a little bit about the Bitnami journey, specifically because there's a lot of cloud and open source founders on the call here. As you could expect, a lot of people wanted to join in and listen to your story, let alone how you're thinking about the future and building open source companies and enabling software development. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the SaaStr talk that you just gave, which I watched and thought was fantastic. And it talks a little bit about the Bitnami journey, the highs and the lows, but more specifically about what that informed about yourself as a leader, and then how to drive communities as part of that.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I could probably talk for a whole hour on the highs and the lows in the Bitnami journey. But I think that really is the key, right? When you're a founder, there are highs and there are lows, no matter what the eventual outcome is of the company. And I feel great about the VMware acquisition and how the company is flourishing within VMware and is a core part of their product lineup. But there's certainly some hard decisions along the way, right? We ended up deciding not to take VC funding. We were very close to raising around at one point, which is not something I think we talk about often. We had term sheets and everything, and then the market really tanked. This was in 2008. And we decided to pull back, and making that decision that it wasn't the right time to raise funding because we saw the market was changing. And through the fundraising process, we really realized that we had some parts of our business that we felt like we still needed to figure out before we were going to scale was interesting. And this was actually, BitRock really became Bitnami, right? So it was the same founder, just for folks on the call who don't know that, but we kind of pivoted in 2013 when we went through Y Combinator into the real Bitnami like scalable business model. But that was definitely one of the hardest decisions that we made was to walk away from funding when you have millions of dollars, available to you and you decide not to take it. That's an interesting call to make. And I think we saw a lot of changes in open source and in cloud really like came to be while we were building this business, right? And part of the reason that we were able to be successful was really the advent of the cloud, right? We were able to kind of ride along with that, and the cloud forced people to change the way that they consumed and deployed and managed software. And that created a really fantastic opening for Bitnami with all the application packaging that we did to make it really easy to deploy apps in the cloud and then to keep everything that you had deployed up to date over time and secure was something that obviously was a huge need when the cloud came to be. So I think that's where Daniel and I's partnership worked out really well. Like, he was great at seeing these kind of trends in the market and where it was going and making sure that we were setting up Bitnami and building the product kind of a little bit ahead of where the market was going. In terms of lessons learned, there's so many things to talk about and so many books written on this, but I'll share a few things that I shared in the SaaStr talk. And I tried to pick things that I don't think people talk about as much because there is a lot of content on this. I think the first thing that I experienced and that I've seen in a lot of the founders that I work with, via the core group and other groups that I'm involved with is the need to build a real support network. And that's both a support network of founders and a peer group to bounce ideas off of, but it's really building folks around you to take work off of your plate. I think, for us at Bitnami, and this is also true at GitHub, like, we really try to lead with like humility and, hey, I'm willing to roll up my sleeves and do everything, or anything that the company needs. And on the one hand, I think that's great, but sometimes it comes at the expense of people realizing when they're not spending their time on the right things because they're trying to like do it all as a founder and conserve cash. So one of the early conversations that Daniel and I got into was I really wanted to hire someone to help us run the office and do a bunch of administrative stuff. And he was kind of like, we have no money. We should be paying the engineer. We were bootstrapping. So we really did not have money. We weren't even really paying ourselves salaries at the time. But my view was like, hey, if I need to drive like the forward momentum of the company, I shouldn't be doing a lot of this administrative work. It's just taking time. And so one of the first things I usually tell founders to do, even if it feels self-important, is get some administrative help, whether it's, just be a part-time like temp service or something, spending time like scheduling stuff and rescheduling stuff and just doing like follow-ups and things that aren't really making the best use of your talents is not in the best interest of the company. So I think that's important. And I will say, especially as I've gone, Bitnami, for those who don't know, is about 75 people at the time of the acquisition. At GitHub, we're over 2,000, and we've doubled in size since I joined in the last 15 months. So we were about 1,000 when I joined, over 2,000 now. And it's really just emphasized this need to continue to push work off my plate and to build more of a support network, whether it's I'm a working mom, right? So I have help at home, or whether it's at work. I think it's important that those of us who have very, very intense and busy jobs are open about when and where we're getting help, and don't pretend like I'm doing it all myself, because I'm not. And I think it's important to be honest about that. I realize I'm really privileged and fortunate to have the help that I do. But I also think, again, it's important to be honest about that, and that we do have help, and that we're not kind of doing it all ourselves. So that's one thing that really stands out, is don't be shy, and really think about what kind of network you need to free up your time for the highest value tasks. And I think that's kind of the next point, which is, a good chunk of my time now is figuring out kind of defining work or spotting things that need to be done. Like, we're forming this new security group to kind of centralize our security work at GitHub, as one example. So I, saw the need, and I drove the conversation to get alignment on the need and got the funding in place. But now it's like, okay, now I'm pushing this off my plate so I can move to the next person. And I think, the more your company grows, and, as a founder, the more kind of your profile grows, you get asked to do more and more things. And I think continually pushing things off and being really selective about what you spend your time on just becomes ever more important. And so, as a founder, constantly ask yourself, is there somebody else that I can pass this work off to that can do it well, so I can step back and really focus on the long-term needs of the business, where we need to go, existential threats, are we doing the right things, that sort of thing. I could go on and on and on, but I'll just leave one more tip that I think is really important, and that's around hiring. As a founder, I think, you're hiring for roles that you've never done before all the time, right? Like, you're hiring a marketing lead or a sales lead, or, a product lead, or whatever it might be. And some of the best advice that I got at Y Combinator was to know what great looks like, and to spend time with amazing people in your network, even if you'll never be able to hire them, to understand what does a great head of marketing look like, right? What's that archetype? What kind of feel and energy am I getting from this person? What do they think about the job description that I wrote? What am I missing about it, right? I still do this at GitHub as I, hire for more roles. And I think a lot of the hiring mistakes that we all make are because people don't spend the time to really understand what they need in the role. And the second thing is, they don't trust their gut. Like, somebody will look good on paper and they'll think, well, they worked at all these great companies, they must be great. For me, if I don't feel good about this person, I must be missing something. I did this all the time, right? I must not get it. Like, everybody, they worked for all these other companies. Clearly, I'm the one that's wrong. Every time I did that, my gut was right. All right. And it's not everybody is the right fit for every place. And the people that I hired against my gut they weren't right for Bitnami, right? Even if they were good folks. So those are my 2 bits of hiring advice. And I'll stop there, because again, I think I could do a whole hour-long talk just on this topic.
Well, we can. There'll be the cocktails chat after, but really good perspective, and I think a lot within that. One part being around surrounding yourself with the right community, the right perspective. And I think, especially given the journey is so hard, having that, group around you, not only to help qualify what other great A talent looks like for the ones that maybe you haven't hired a sales leader, you can go find another A sales leader, have them interview your candidate, and pull that forward and see if they're a really good fit. And I think at the end of the day, trusting your gut is always a good call. And we'd love to, now transition a little bit over to the GitHub experience, which, taking over the COO role in a time of incredible craziness in the world, would love to learn a little bit about how you've continued your own leadership journey and what that's looked like in this remote first world, the considerations that you were thinking as you came in, and kind of where you are now.
Yeah, and before I get into the specific question, I think one important thing to note is the COO is probably the most flexible and amorphous role on a leadership team, right? Because it really changes a lot over time and flexes to the business needs. So some folks see the title and they think, okay, Erica runs operations. Sort of. Like what I'm really at GitHub to do is to be a partner to the rest of the executive team and identify ways to unlock the potential, like untapped potential within GitHub, whether that's market opportunity, community opportunity, and open source, improving the way that we operate as a business, removing friction, making it easier to get work done. Like if you really look at what my job is about, that's what it's about. And, when I started at GitHub, there were 3 orgs that I inherited that had all been through some challenging times. Some of them didn't have leaders in place. Others had just been through a lot of leadership changes. GitHub had obviously just been through the Microsoft acquisition, which closed something like 8 months before I joined. So there's just been this period of change. So I started with support, business development, and workplace experience. And workplace experience is both our physical office locations, but also our remote work experience and our co-working spaces. And so at first I had to do like really deep dives into those orgs and help bring in leaders where it made sense and kind of redefine their mission. BD was 2 people at the time that I joined. We had to kind of reboot and rebuild BD within GitHub. And so I almost acted as a VP for a little while. And I shared with the executive team, like, it's going to take me 6 months to really get to be the COO because I need to go deep. I need to get everything started or set on the right course. And this even goes back to my earlier point, right? Like go deep, figure it out, and then kind of pass it off. Now those orgs are flourishing. We have great leaders in place. And in fact, like support has moved into our revenue organization to lead up customer success and some other work we're doing. But I have since, we hired a GM in India. We launched GitHub India. We've built out a new international expansion strategy function that rolls into me. I have a new function that we just created I'm super excited about, which is bringing a DI&B lens to the 4 pillars of the work that we do, like people, platform, philanthropy, and policy. So taking, I think, a really interesting approach there. I work on sustainability across the whole business. And now we're forming this security group under me. And so, when I think about my role at GitHub, again, it's really about like, what are the needs of the business and where can I deliver the most value outside of what might be happening within, say, like our engineering, product, and design function or our revenue or marketing function. And because of my background and passion for open source, I definitely follow a lot of our DevRel work when we're joining foundations or thinking about joining them. I end up getting pulled into that. Despite the fact that we're a 2,000 person company, we're still very much a startup. And so it's really like we team up and we get it done. And if somebody has a particular passion for area of expertise, like I do with open source, I get pulled into all kinds of things that you might not expect from my title. Yeah.
Well, it's many hats, and I'm sure you wear them all well. But GitHub also has this reputation for not only hiring good people, but to the point you made around unlocking them. And as we go into this remote first world, I'd love any things that you're thinking about in the role that you're in, as well as a company around how do you unlock the best of everybody in this kind of crazy new times?
Yeah. And the move to remote work has been interesting, even for GitHub, where we had a large portion of our employee base remote, right? But the folks that were working remotely generally joined GitHub to work remotely or were used to working remotely. And that was kind of their expectation coming in. There was obviously this other group of folks who either want to be in an office or it's easier for them to get their jobs done in an office because of their function. So it's been an adjustment for us. I think One thing that really stands out to me that COVID has emphasized, but is true at any company, is the amount of time and energy that you need to spend on internal communications. And I think people underestimate that a lot. I spend a very significant amount of my time on internal comms and the messaging that's going out to the company and where it's going out and how it's going out. And, you know, a wise person once said, if you want people to really remember and internalize something, you have to tell them 5 times in 5 different ways. And I believe that. And I'll say it's even more true when we're working in a distributed environment. And so, you know, even at a small company, like we learned some hard lessons around this at Bitnami. Things were moving really quickly and we didn't always realize that we weren't kind of bringing the team along and constantly like providing updates and helping everybody really understand the vision and how it was evolving over time. And that just gets amplified when you're in a big company that's globally distributed, especially across time zones. So, you know, one thing that's really key is just constant communication and a lot of venues for it, right? We host all hands, but we also do open Q&As for the whole company. We started doing them in 2 different time zones, one morning Pacific and one late in the evening Pacific for folks in APAC. And I think providing those opportunities is important. I think another thing that we've really been investing in and iterating around is helping people find ways to still be connected and build relationships. And we do a bunch of fun things and we're always experimenting with more, but one of them is like every Wednesday morning, we do coffee and beats, and we partnered with a nonprofit to hire local artists. Well, I always say local artists, they're actually global artists, but musicians of all genres all over the world. And they come in and they play a private set for Hubbers, and they can just jump on a Zoom call and everybody kind of chats about the music and just has a moment to connect over something that they care about. We also are streaming like mindfulness classes and exercise classes, giving folks the time to come together and stretch. We've tried like Octo Kittens, that's what we call the kiddos of Hubbers, like online yoga classes for them. I think the attendance for that wasn't as high, but you know, we've kind of created these virtual mini offsites in a box where folks are encouraged to bring their teams together. And we've done remote cooking classes. We've streamed happy hour, like bartending classes where you can, you know, alcoholic or non-alcoholic drinks you can make with a group. And I think it really is important to find these opportunities for people to connect in smaller groups with people they wouldn't always spend time with, because building that connective tissue, when it's not just that people aren't in an office, but, you know, even in a remote company before, people would be meeting up at conferences or they'd be coming to visit our offices around the world and spending time with Hubbers there, right? They were still having these opportunities to come together. And I think you need to be really intentional about investing in those. And sometimes that's hard, right? Because it can feel a little frivolous. I don't know about the other folks in the call, but I'm like very execution oriented and I want to get things done. And like, you know, it's hard to think, hey, we really should carve out time. And especially when you have 2,000 people, like think about what every meeting costs us in terms of time, anything that we do. But I think building that connective tissue really actually helps enable working together and working across teams. I'll leave one other tidbit in there. And I think that's, you know, really being intentional about how you get work done in a remote world and how information is shared. So at GitHub, we use GitHub for almost everything. We default to open, right? And you can find information on all different aspects of the business in repos that each team maintains. And, you know, we might, you know, use a Google Doc or something if we're capturing a long form document or business update, but then that always gets linked in an issue. So it's discoverable. And I think, you know, again, being intentional about the fact that you might have people in different time zones or right now that are working around family or care schedules or have other needs that they need to attend to, given everything going on in the world, having as much of your working style kind of emphasize this async, remote, work environment that they're all in is important. And you do have to be deliberate about that. Like if everything is still happening in private Slack channels and Zoom calls, people are going to really quickly lose context, and then they're not going to make the best decisions for the business.
Yeah, that's great. And you're doing it in the way I think you only could. And I think I'm going to steal the coffee and beats, so maybe we'll just play Spotify at underscore.
There you
but
go.
What a great way to approach it. We have some time for Q&A, and we've had some good discussion. While some of these questions come in, maybe one quick question while everybody starts to add their questions into the chat would be, you gave this talk at All Things Open around going from 50 million developers, which blows my mind that are using GitHub, and going to 100 million. Tell me a little bit about that growth and how you're seeing that and where it's coming from.
Yeah, thanks for watching my keynotes too. That's super cool. Yeah, so at GitHub, we have stated that we expect to have 100 million developers on the platform by 2025. And I think what's really interesting, and you see this if you get a chance to go check out the keynote, 17 minutes long. It's online on YouTube. I think All Things Open, you can just search for. But there's a map that we show, right? And the reality is when you look at the way that populations are shifting, and when you look in the growth of engineering and developers in a lot of the developing world in particular, you see that most of the world's population is going to come from Africa and Asia, and quite a bit in Latin America. And we're seeing amazing growth in open source in all of those regions already. So I think it's really exciting to think about like the power and the opportunity that open source can bring to people. And there's incredible stories that I share in my talk about folks who got involved in open source, and it's created this whole new life for them, like a new livelihood, a new way of working, a new community that they're connected into. And to your first question, like that's really the power of open source that gets me so excited. But I do believe as folks get more access to technology, as we have new ways of doing development, like we have code spaces at GitHub where you can spin up a whole development environment in the cloud in like seconds. It's going to enable people in places where they might not all have laptops, right? They might need to work from a phone and a keyboard, for example, to get involved and to engage in the open source community. And what I encourage folks to do in the talks that I've been giving is like to think about how you build your communities and how you build your projects to harness this and to not only bring opportunity to folks in all these different parts of the world, but also to give them to bring that talent into your projects, right? Like there's so much work to be done in the world, and there's so much that software is accelerating human progress. And I think, us being intentional about like building inclusive communities, building inclusive products, thinking about the mobile first experience, thinking about mobilization will help us build better products that serve a broader audience. And, we need to do that if we want to get to 100 million developers, and we need those folks to support the needs of the world, which is becoming ever increasingly dependent on open source. So thanks for that question. Obviously, it's a fun thing to think about. Like, what are all these people going to create? It's mind blowing when you think about the impact that folks can have on the world as we get all this right.
Yeah, absolutely. Give them the palette and the colors and let them paint their paintings, which will be really fun to see.
Exactly.
And so, with the open Q&A, we wanted to open for a few questions, a couple in the thread here, either from Ashton or John. Maybe Ashton, we'll run a little experiment and open up the mics. So if Ashton, you want to ask your question, that'd be great.
Oh, you're muted, Ashton.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Thank you. I'm curious what your reaction is to companies. GitHub is a source of an incredible amount of intelligence and generates, of course, its own data. And I'm curious what your reaction is to companies that mine GitHub data to create their own commercial advantage. And I'm thinking of one that I've invested in here in the Boston area, Flipside Crypto, but I'm sure there are many.
Yeah, great question. I think that GitHub is for developers and it's for the community and it's for the world, right? Like Nat, our CEO, talks about being the maintainer of GitHub, and we really do think about it that way. Like GitHub wouldn't be what it is without developers building amazing things on the platform. And so, I think there are a bunch of projects that pull GitHub data and then folks who build around that. And I don't have any issues at all with that. In fact, I think it's important to understand the needs of developers when we're building products. So as long as folks are honoring, privacy laws and any terms of service that are applicable, I think this can and should be the case. And I think over time, we'll continue to look at how can we make more data available to folks to continue to build great things on and around GitHub. Nat has a phrase that I'll steal, which is like, we do have an incredible team, but the creativity of Hubbers can never match the creativity of the world's developers, right? It will never be the case. So I think we need folks building on and around GitHub and on the data that GitHub is produced by GitHub and that's shared, as long as, again, you're honoring any terms of service or privacy laws. And over time, we'll look at ways that we can make that easier for folks.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah, and let's see, we also have John Kennedy. You have a question about the Linux Foundation. Would love you to ask that if we could open up the mic.
Great, sure thing. Hi, Erica, and hi, Richard. This is John. So what do you think the Linux Foundation's team's strongest operational capabilities are, when you're working with them? How do you think open source projects should work or should aim to work with the Linux Foundation team? Where will they get the most leverage?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think there are a couple things that the Linux Foundation does really well. One is just an important service of running back-end operations and financial management and oversight and everything, and all the legal and compliance requirements and things like that for foundations. Like, I think it's important that we have an organization that can serve that function for projects, because otherwise projects are reinventing the wheel, and these amazing folks that are trying to just build incredible software end up spending a lot of their time on like administrativia that doesn't actually lend any strategic advantage to the platform. So I think that's one thing that's blocking and tackling, but it's important. The other thing is the LF has great depth of expertise in what good project governance looks like. And that's incredibly important when setting up an open source project. Like, what are the bylaws? What is the kind of management structure of the project? How do we ensure the continuity and sustainability of important technology that people rely on? And how do we make sure that there's a process that's community driven to help appoint the leadership of the project to make sure that it's always in good hands? And there's a lot of nuance to this, and there's a group of folks in the world that are exceptionally good at it and experienced, and a lot of them have made a lot of mistakes and learned from them. And so I think the Linux Foundation can serve as a great partner there and helping to set up and kind of honor the organizational and functional structures and governing boards and bodies of foundations. And the last piece is events and reach. The Linux Foundation puts on, in my, obviously biased opinion, some of the best events in the world around open source. They have an incredible machine around events that produces, fantastic events with fantastic content. There's a real honor and appreciation for highlighting voices of all kinds and diverse perspectives, which I think is really important in technology. And there's a big focus and just an announcement going out. I think it just went out this weekend or going out this week around, improving the on-ramp into open source and development for people all over the world, right? Focusing on what we can do to help people onboard into open source, what we can do to increase STEM education around the world. There's a lot that the LF can do to help bring exposure to and people into projects. So I think those are really, kind of the support structures that the LF puts in place around a project that allows the folks that are doing the important work of defining what the project should look like, what you're trying to accomplish, and actually getting that work done, like it allows those folks to focus on that. And I think that's really important. It goes to my first point about making the best use of everybody's time. You want the project creators to focus on the project, not to have to worry about all this other stuff.
Erica, there's a great question in chat from Shashir. Either we can unmute him to ask it. Jenny, can you do that? Or I'm happy to ask it.
Hey, Erica, can you hear me?
Hello.
Hey, I was actually just asking Nat to give me questions for you, and he said you should definitely ask Erica about China and about what GitHub is doing, expanding there, and what you've learned, and maybe what the rest of our businesses can learn on how to work in China.
You said Nat told you to ask that?
He did. He gave me 3 other questions, but that was the one I picked.
Okay. Yeah, so I think, there's an incredible base of talented developers in China, and I care deeply about keeping developers around the world connected into and participating in the global open source community. I think that's so important for all of us. And so, our approach is really focused on what can we do to help developers do their best work in China. And so looking at things like how do we speed up the platform in China, how can we host events to bring developers into the community? I just actually spoke at CosCon over the weekend on this topic of open source and the next 50 million developers, and where I think there's a huge opportunity for Chinese developers to participate more in the global open source community. There's so much talent, and there's a lot of usage of open source and building on it. And there's a great open source community there, but there's so much untapped potential in China. So I'd love to see us open that up. I think I answered her. I'm trying to remember the other pieces. Oh, what advice would I have for other companies going into China? I think you really need to think about your business goals. I mean, certainly there's a lot of heightened tension between the US and China right now. And I think it's important to take that into account when you're plotting out any business strategy. Like, where do you think those relations are going to be over the next few years? Who do you feel comfortable selling to in China? What do you want that to look like? And, that's very much informed kind of our view on let's do everything we can to support developers in China to continue to participate in the global open source community. But where exactly you draw the lines there, I think will look different depending on your unique business.
It's a great question, Shashir. Thank you for asking it.
Yeah.
And great answer, Erica. Next up, I'd love to answer Wayne's question. If you could open that, Jenny.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, okay. I don't think I actually drafted my question correctly, but really, as you think about the development activity and you think about what's trending, I just threw out 3 different, let's call them technologies: machine learning, big data, or VR. Which one do you see sort of having a lot of momentum or a lot of velocity as you look out 2 or 3 years?
Oh, geez, all of them. I mean, I don't think you can pick one. I mean, there's so much important transformation happening in technology. I think what I'm excited about is how we can bring some of these technologies to the software development process to make developers' lives better, right? At the end of the day, that's all we're focused on at GitHub is what can we do to empower developers to do the best work of their lives, right? What can we do in the platform? And so, I think using data to help understand how developers work and what their needs are and where there are opportunities to improve developers' lives is clearly important. I mean, there's a bunch of other things we could talk about when it comes to big data as well, right? I mean, just look at what's happening in terms of COVID research because folks are collaborating around and sharing data sets and diving into them. It's been one of the silver linings to me, which I look for in any crisis, is the way that folks have really come together and started really sharing information around research and what's happening, and the collaboration we're seeing between private companies and nonprofits and the government and individuals to try to solve this global problem is inspiring. And I hope some of the connective tissues that have been built in going through this will help us to solve other problems the world's facing. So, clearly there's a lot beyond just, making developers' lives better, that big data will help us improve in the way that we work in the world. And I think, machine learning is a really important piece of this too, right? Because you need big data, you need data sets to be able to build good models, right? And to use machine learning to actually achieve solutions to whatever problems you're trying to solve. So, I think all of these things will really impact the way that we get work done and how efficient we are and where we spend our time, especially as technologists. I think you asked about VR as well, and I'll be honest, like, I'm not super deep in VR. I think there are a ton of interesting applications that I've seen, from the medical field to how we try to keep people connected in this remote world. I have a friend who's working on a VR startup for, conference, like video conferencing and stuff, to make you feel a little bit more connected in meetings. And I think that stuff's fascinating, but, in terms of my particular areas of interest, it's certainly more around big data and machine learning and what we can use those to enable.
Thank you.
That's great. Good perspective. And there's one question in an area that I know you care deeply about, which is security, from Eileen. Eileen, do you want to ask that question?
I just want to hear your comments on anything cybersecurity related for GitHub. Your thoughts?
Man, that's a giant topic. So what I'll say is, GitHub serves as the home for the world's developers, which means that a lot of incredibly important work happens on our platform. And I think we're all honored and humbled by the fact that that's the case. And when we carry a great responsibility with that, to do everything that we can to protect the data and what's happening on the GitHub platform. So, this is something that I'm personally spending a lot of time on. I know Nat's spending a lot of time on is, what can we continue to do to, there's always ways to continue to increase security on the platform. And I think platforms like GitHub are seeing increasing amounts of, bad actor attacks, right? I mean, we all saw what happened to Twitter and how folks are using very clever social engineering to try to get access to company systems. And, obviously we were already taking a lot of precautions, but we try to learn every time we see things happening across the industry. And we're just continually pushing on what more can we do to both train hubbers to help people understand what to look for, and also to put the right protections in place to make sure that we continue to keep data safe. I think one other thing I'll say is we're making a lot of investments in helping developers build and maintain more secure source code. So you may have seen that we acquired a company called Semel just about a year ago, which is an incredible team of really deep experts on, code analysis. They built one of the, we think the best static code analysis tool on the planet. And now we've launched a product called GitHub Advanced Security that's really all about helping you identify vulnerabilities in your code, get them fixed, and continue to build and maintain the most secure source code possible. And this is something that I think GitHub is really uniquely positioned to do because of the amount of software being built, on the GitHub platform. And so going back to some of the earlier questions, we can really take advantage of the data that we have in how code is developed and use that to inform our product development to make sure that we are providing developers with, every tool and the best kind of knowledge and information available to be able to maintain, the most secure code possible in all of their projects. This is something that we need to win together. We need to constantly fight together. It's not something that one company is going to solve on its own.
That's great. Thank you, Erica. And maybe interesting question on the COO role and how to do that successfully across multiple companies now. Brianne, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. Hello?
Yeah,
Hi.
perfect.
Excellent. Hi, I'm Brianne. I had this question because I know I've been reading up a lot on the role. I run a startup right now. We're 11 employees in Boston, and thinking ahead about potentially bringing one on, it seems like that particular role is different at every startup or every company. And since you've been a COO in multiple places and multiple companies, I'd love to hear what you see as what makes a successful COO. What are the core values of that role that you live by? Like, how do you really think about being a COO and what the role entails?
Sure. And there's a great article that's pretty short from HBS it's called, I think, The Misunderstood Role of the COO. And that's something I always refer people to too, because there are these different kind of archetypes of what a COO looks like. I mean, at Bitnami, Daniel and I had very different skill sets, and we basically divided the business so that he ran product and engineering, and he was responsible for kind of the overall business strategy. Those were his strengths, and I ran everything else, right? So we truly did operate as a partnership, and it was, you know, Daniel and I, and then eventually we built the executive team around us to fill in like the gaps in the areas where it made sense for us to pass off, you know, different areas of responsibility, as I talked about earlier. I think at GitHub, you know, I was brought on because of both my kind of founder background and mentality. I'm used to just identifying and solving problems. And I think, you know, Nat and the rest of the leadership team there was really looking for someone who could take some work that was very important off the plates of other executives so they could focus on, you know, either their core function or their areas of expertise. I think, you know, Nat is a brilliant technologist. He spends a ton of time on the product, the strategy, you know, deeply passionate about the developer community, spends lots of time speaking with them in sales. And I'm really there to identify, like, where are there areas of the business that we can improve. I talked earlier, and I think this really is the key phrase. Like, my role is about unlocking potential in the business. So that can take a lot of different forms. And I honestly expect my role to look very different a year from now than it does now. And it certainly looks a lot different now than it did a year ago. So I think, you know, my advice to you as an early stage founder is to look at really, like, what are the needs of your team and your business, and what especially are your unique strengths, and where do you need to bolster those with another set of strengths, right? Whether it's someone that you need who's really great at comms, who, you know, can go deep into the details. Like, I'm known for like spelunking and going down and trying to figure out what's really going on, and then kind of pulling myself back up to look across the business. Like, you need to think about what skills you have on your founding team and where you need to complement those at this stage. And the other piece of advice I'd give is, you know, really spend time getting clarity on where you draw the lines. I think one of the most challenging things is understanding really who is owning and responsible for what pieces, and having really clear communications around that. Because otherwise what can happen is, you know, when you're moving fast, like one person over here, maybe it's a CEO, just expects that the COO is taking care of a bunch of stuff, but there's never really been a conversation about ownership. And that can just lead to, you know, gaps and blind spots in the business, and work not happening that should be. So I think it is important to define, like, what are the expectations? What do you need out of this person? And then regularly revisit that as the team and the business grows and evolves.
It's great. Certainly a unique and challenging role, and agree with the thoughts on communication and making those clear. You know, being conscious of time, we have about 5 minutes left, and I wanted to ask one question that my partner Michael, who you know very well, asked here as well. which is to touch on something you care about personally, and whatever that is, whether it's open source, whether it's developing women in tech, whether it's anything. As long as you care about it, I'd love to use the last 5 minutes to talk about that.
Oh, wow. There's a lot of things I care about. And thanks for the great question, Michael. It's good to have you here. I think if I was going to pick one, I think honestly, it's STEM education in the US and around the world, where we are not as strong as I see in other countries. Like, for example, I've been spending a lot of time focused on India. We built up an incredible team there, and there's just so much passion and talent in India. And I've been learning a little bit more about the education system, and they teach coding as part of the standard curriculum when kids are like 10 now. And it really pains me to see that we don't do that in the US. Obviously, I don't know about the education systems in every part of the world, but I have a 7-year-old, right? And so I'm like acutely aware of what our kids are being taught. And I'm also acutely aware of the opportunities that I think an education in STEM can provide, especially to folks in underrepresented groups. Like, there's so much incredible talent out there that just hasn't been given kind of the exposure to technology and the opportunity to see the wonder and find their passion in different areas of technology. And I think as we talk about how the world is increasingly powered by software and technology, and when we look at what kinds of opportunities are going to help us lift up these different parts of the developing world, there's a real opportunity for us to invest and to change the way that we bring exposure to technology and invite folks into the open source world, whether it's software or hardware, whether it's more around like open sourcing and sharing data, right? And just giving folks access to information, whether it's sharing, medical research and papers that tend to be behind firewalls or paywalls so students can learn more about research. There's just, I keep talking about like untapped potential, but there's just so much not only untapped potential, but an opportunity to improve people's lives if we can get this right. And it's an area, especially in the US, where we've been underinvested. And as we look at kind of where job opportunities are going to be in the future, we need to focus on this, not only in our youth, but in reskilling folks whose jobs are going to be taken over in some cases by robots. I think like that video of a Tesla factory is incredible, and it's really a view into what the future is going to look like. And we are going to lose jobs over time as we get better at automating processes. And we need to, as a society, really focus on like, how do we expose these folks that are going to be out of jobs who are still incredibly talented to new opportunities? How do we bring them into the technology world? And I think, I'm really proud of the work that GitHub has been doing through GitHub Education, through some of the other skilling programs that we're collaborating on with Microsoft and LinkedIn to really bring opportunities to folks to learn. And I will say the Linux Foundation is doing some fantastic and incredibly important work in this area. So yeah, lots to talk about, but I want to see us get STEM education right. And I'm really happy. I think GitHub has an important role to play in that.
Absolutely. And great to hear your excitement for it, and look forward to following along with the impact you'll be able to make on that. I wanted to hand it over to Jenny as we kind of pull it to conclusion and wrap things up.
Thank you so much, Erica. This is a fantastic discussion. I know I learned a ton. I hope everyone did as well. Thank you for your thoughtful questions, and really excited that people were able to get time one-on-one to ask Erica as well. If you want to stay connected to _VC, feel free to reach out to me directly. We'd love to talk more about the core community and how to get you involved. And hopefully we'll be able to see many more of you at our next many more Core Collective Series events. We also will be sending out a survey after this event. Would love your feedback. Always hoping to improve the experience and hear who else you want to see. So thank you so much, Erica, again, and Richard. And great to connect with all of you here today.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for being here, everyone.